in my mind. I pocket every time. All the seven God's design. Lift up my kingdom. Lift up my name. I cloak my greed in glory. Call it holy flame. I'm a mega
Hey guys, welcome to Mega Maniacs. I'm so glad I am back this week, and I am glad everyone is here to join me. Thank you, everyone, for your prayers last week. If you said any for me, I appreciate it. I know that there was a little prayer group for me. I'm doing much better. I actually ended up with a terrible infection in my leg, and it this is the second time that it's happened. So I may have to have surgery on it, but fingers crossed, prayers that that is not the case. So tonight is going to be the first time we have heard from someone like Miss Kim. And I am very excited to have her on the podcast for several reasons, but it's deeply personal and it's deeply important because she was someone that was on the inside. So before I get too far into her introduction and welcome her to Mega Maniacs, I want to make sure that I say a couple of things. So, big thank you to my brother, of course, Everett at Ohio for Freedom. He may be on right after me, but he promised me he would not start until I am done if he has not already been on. But I am using several clips from his podcast of some interviews that he did back in 2024. And these were interviews of people that had attended or had been a part of Impact Church in Ironton, Ohio, which is David Amos, Bishop David Amos's church that he started in Ironton, which he is not affiliated with anymore. But my guest tonight, that was where her experience began. I also want to thank Mr. Who. He's had some new episodes come out. And then I also want everyone to know this. In a couple of weeks, it is going to be the 2-year anniversary of Mega Maniacs, if you can believe that. And during this episode, we want to play a compilation of videos that we are asking you to send in to megamaniacs777 at gmail.com. And these would be videos of what has Mega Maniacs meant to you? How has it blessed you, helped you, made you realize any of those things? So if you could please record those, maybe keep them 2 minutes or less, and send those to megamaniacs777 at gmail.com. And we are going to put something together for that 2-year anniversary. So now back to my guest. So my guest tonight, Kim, is not someone speculating from the outside. She was there. She was a part of Impact Church, which again was David Amos's church in Ironton, Ohio. And she was there during its earliest days. She was mentored, trusted, and eventually ordained through City Harvest Network. She saw the inside, she saw the growth, she saw the transformation, and eventually she made the decision to walk away. Not out of bitterness, not out of rebellion, but out of conviction. Tonight, she is here to share her firsthand experience and her journey from belief to questions to clarity. So, everyone, please help me welcome Kim to Mega Maniacs. Hi,
Hi.
Kim.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Wonderful. Again,
Awesome.
I know I told you already, but I appreciate you so much. Thank you for agreeing to come on the podcast and answering some questions that we've not had answers to, I don't think ever. But also, there's there's people that we're going to talk about that you and I have had experiences with. You've got some receipts we're going to show, some pictures, a letter that you wrote to David Amos. And so I want to sort of start um, and let everyone know that you were someone that was involved with Impact Church there in Ironton, Ohio. You had a relationship with David Amos and some of the people that were going to show interviews from Everett's podcast. I want to show this really quick because you were ordained through City Harvest Network. It looks like August 5th of 2020.
Yes.
And so just to give, and I'm going to let you do some talking. I'm backwards on my camera, so I'm trying to figure out how to swoop my hair. Hi.
You're good.
I'm going to ask you how you came to Impact Church, but I want to give everyone just a brief overview. If you've not watched the podcast before, if maybe you're not familiar with David Amos, Rod Parsley, City Harvest Network, and you can kind of fill in some of these blanks as well. But I started working at World Harvest in 2019, and shortly after that is when I met David Amos. He was hired through World Harvest, and I wasn't involved in that process, but he was hired because his church, Impact Church in Ironton, Ohio, which you live sort of across the river from Ironton in Flatwoods, Kentucky, I believe, which is
Ashland.
where my
But
dad
close enough.
lives. And I was born in Ironton, Ohio, and grew up down in that area. So we have uh, very similar, or we have a lot of similarities from that aspect.
Right.
So David started this church down here. We're going to kind of get into all of that in a few minutes, but tell everyone how you came to Impact Church and eventually became ordained through City Harvest Network.
Well, this is a very interesting story. I am a recovering alcoholic. I have over 8 years sober now. And so I had a restaurant at the time. I was sober at the time. And David and his wife had been to a wedding that I had catered. And so they came in to hire us to cater their baby shower. I had a relapse, and I did not show up to cater the baby shower. And so, yes, it was a very dark time, a very dark time.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
they at the time were going to the intersection, which is Kevin Campbell was the pastor of that. And that's where I went when I went, but having a restaurant, I rarely got to go to church, but we were affiliated with them. So, long story short, the intersection lost their lease and became Impact Church across the river because they were in Ashland. And I was invited by one of the ladies who we'd known each other. We were friends, and it was actually Rick Skeen's mother. And she invited me to come over to Impact. And I was like, I couldn't do that. There's no way I could do that. I couldn't go over there after what I did. But before the intersection closed, Kevin Campbell was gracious enough to let me have the microphone, and I publicly apologized, part of making amends, working the steps. And so that's how I ended up over at Impact. And it was honestly like nothing ever happened. He was like such a different person at the time.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's important that you talk about Kevin Campbell, the intersection. going to Impact Church because I know Kevin Campbell, and we're going to sort of talk about him later on in the podcast, but before Intersection, he was actually the lead pastor at Plaza Church of the Nazarene there in Russell, Kentucky. And he was there for many years. My dad attended there. He still attends there. It's now Plaza Community Church, but it was Plaza Church of the Nazarene. And Kevin did the baby dedication for my oldest son. His wife, Robin, was, I mean, they're just wonderful people. I just want to say that they, when I think of a real pastor and also someone personally in my life that has made a huge impact, especially from that pastoral role, Kevin Campbell is at the top of the list.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and there's a couple other ones from Columbus, Ohio, once I moved to Columbus, but Kevin is at the top of the list, and it's important that we establish all of this because you're going to hear about Intersection, you're going to hear about Impact from other people that we're going to play clips from Ohio for Freedom. So thank you for giving that that statement of how you became a part of Impact Church. So you started going to Impact, and then eventually, what sort of was the lead up to you actually becoming ordained through City Harvest Network?
So I had felt that God was calling me to go back to school and to preach. But I grew up Baptist. You know, we made casseroles and taught Sunday school and sang in the choir. So nowhere in my wheelhouse did I think I would ever become a preacher. But one day God spoke audibly to me and told me that I was going to preach. And I told him, I said, I'm going to have confirmation because I just can't, I can't wrap my head around this. And so David Amos had told me one day we had gone to have lunch and didn't really know him that well yet. He didn't really know me. We were just kind of getting to know each other, and we'd gone to Tim Hortons to have lunch and coffee. And he had said to me, one day, I think I'll see you in my pulpit. And I was like, oh, confirmation. And so from there, I went to Valor. Obviously, you know, I hate to say pushed because I could have said no, but I didn't even look at other schools. I just went, you know, I applied to Valor and got accepted and started going to school. And it was really a godsend during COVID. It really gave me something to do, especially as a recovering alcoholic. So that's how I ended up going to Valor. And then when you graduate Valor, I mean, unless something's horribly wrong, you just automatically become ordained through them.
I gotcha. Okay. And Valor, and I'm sure that everyone that's watching knows this, but Valor Christian College is the college that is under the World Harvest Church umbrella, and the college that the City Harvest Network churches, they're funneling these young people and sometimes other people, adults, to go to the Bible college. Right. So this is a question that I have been wanting to get answered, and because the last pastor that was CHN, he flaked on me, right? So what was the process like to get ordained through City Harvest Network, i.e., are there reference checks? Are there background checks? What is the process that you have to go through to become a City Harvest Network pastor?
I filled out an application. That was it. There was nothing else. There were some questions that you had to answer. Like, do you believe in speaking in tongues? Do you believe that that's a spiritual gift? Some questions like that. And then you also had to agree to give back to your ministry financially. That could be as little as $20 a month. But that's basically all there was to it. As far as I know, I didn't fill out anything to get a background check or anything like that. I'm now ordained through the Wesleyan Church, and it was incredibly harder than it was
Yeah.
for CHN. A whole different process.
What would be, not that I want to spend too much time here, but what would be some of the major differences from the Wesleyan Church ordaining you compared to City Harvest Network?
The Wesleyan Church requires it's kind of a longer process. Mine was a little quicker because I was ordained through transfer, but now I have so long to get some other college classes. The classes are a lot harder than anything I had at Valor, and my pastor has to walk through a certain amount of ministry with me, and he has to sign off on that before officially ordained without transfer. So it was a much longer process. I'm still in the process.
Okay. So, and I guess I asked that because obviously there's a lot of scandal that you hear about, especially in the churches and some of these mega pastors. And unfortunately, a lot of these City Harvest Network churches and pastors have had lots of scandal, but several occasions of pedophilia and child sex abuse. So there's a chance, a big chance, at least with City Harvest Network, that you could have committed these atrocities against people, against children, and they would never know about it unless you disclosed it.
I wouldn't think so. Not based on my experience. I would not think so.
Okay. Well, and again, I am not shocked by that because we know that those things have happened at World Harvest and they've been covered up. But I would think, if I was running a company, and even when I worked at World Harvest, for goodness sakes, because they had a school attached to it, we had to do FBI and BCI background checks on everyone, like even if they weren't working in the school because they were around kids. But you can be a part of CHN and not have to go through that much of that process.
Correct.
Okay. So as a pastor yourself, ordination is not casual, just like you're sort of talking about with your experience now with the Wesleyan Church. It represents trust, authority, and alignment. At the time that you were under David Amos, Impact Church, City Harvest Network, did you fully trust David Amos?
There came to a point where I did not. In the beginning, I did. I was like, I thought he showed tremendous grace to me, he and his wife, and I just thought they showed tremendous grace. And so in the beginning, I did. But as time went on, there were some lies, there was some stretching of the truth. There was a lot of stretching of the truth. And so it got to where I didn't, but it just seemed like it all happened. And I kept dismissing it and dismissing it and dismissing it, knowing in my gut, and especially Dave, my husband, was like, this stuff is just not right. And I just kept asking him to just hang in there. Like, it's going to get better. It's going to get better. But it's just like this mind thing. It's so hard to explain until you've been in it and then gotten out of it. It's just hard to explain. Did I trust CHN? I mean, I guess because I didn't know that much about them. So at the time, I guess I trusted them. I just didn't know that much about them.
Yeah. Well, and it's, I've said this before. Well, I've said this several times, but I think And I know that this would have been true for me in the past before I really got an inside look at how some of these things work, is that many people oftentimes treat pastors like doctors, right?
Mhm.
They have more education than you do. They have your best interest at heart. They're supposed to have the fruits of the spirit and be compassionate. And before we really have a chance to test the fruit, we sort of blindly trust them a lot of times until other things make us raise some eyebrows about maybe what's really going on here.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And
So, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think one thing, and I mentioned this to you when we were talking, it seems like something so small, but it was a pivotal moment for me. They were doing like a devotional, I think it was on Mondays, and it was like this short devotional on Mondays. And so I thought, man, that would be really cool. I would love to do that. So I sent an actual message to Rod, who I thought was Rod Parsley, about, hey, I'm an online student. I'm in Kentucky, but I would love to do one of those devotionals. And when I told David Amos about that, he was like, oh, don't ever do that again. You don't ever contact him directly. Just don't. And I was so taken aback by that, because I thought, why wouldn't I? Like any pastor I've ever had in my life, I could go up and talk to them. Why can't I go talk to him? And so that was kind of when I started being like, something's maybe not right here.
Yeah. Yeah. And I actually forgot that you told me that, but that just reminded me that. And did he ever give a reason why you were not to reach out directly to Rod Parsley?
He said that Pentecostals have like this honor, this chain of commands. And so you don't go directly to the pastor. There's a chain of commands to follow. You don't just go directly to the pastor.
Hmm. Well, every church I've been to, by the way, I've always been able to go directly
Yeah,
to
exactly.
the pastor. I have never had to go through, layers
Right,
of people
right.
to, but it was certainly like that at World Harvest. I don't know if that's typical. I mean, I know it's typical of their churches, but I haven't really ever been to another Pentecostal church, so I don't know if that's really the case. But even us as staff members, I mean, I was the director of HR, and I couldn't go directly to Rod Parsley unless he happened to come in my office or something and I could talk to him directly. But even I couldn't just say, hey, I need to talk to you for a second, or I'm going back to see Rod, right? Like that's not a thing.
Crazy.
So I'm going to move on now, and we're getting ready to play our first clip from Ohio for Freedom 2024. But what you experienced wasn't isolated, and we're going to start talking about those things. But I thought that it was important to pull these clips of people that you know that were also involved with Impact Church there in Ironton, Ohio. So others who were inside described the exact same shift of the Rod Parsley influence. And you talked about that in this letter, and we're going to read some excerpts, but we're going to show and read the letter in its entirety towards the end. But do you know Timo? So if I say the name Timo, does that name ring a bell to you?
Yes.
Okay. And how well do you know Timo? Like what was your interaction with him?
We were both elders at Impact at the same time.
Gotcha. Okay. So I'm going to play a clip from an interview that Timo did with Everett at Ohio for Freedom in August 2024, and then then we'll discuss it. So let me just pull this up.
And so we hit this point where he's starting to do, I think probably April, May, he starts his first like pseudo legacy tour. So now he's not, this isn't like the official one that's going to happen in like 2022, because he's, when he like moves up there and stuff, which is beyond mine because I don't know him at that point because I resigned.
Yeah.
But we do this legacy tour. I go with him, I think, to 2 of his churches, and it's all about Ron Parsley and the legacy and Howard Carter, Smith Wigglesworth, Lester Sumrall, like just those names over and over. And
you said Rod Parsley.
yep, I said Rod Parsley. You have to stand
Okay.
up.
Sorry.
Yeah. And so this started taking over, and I was like, man, this is. And so about a year, and sorry, I keep going back and forth, but I'm trying to make sure you understand what's happening. About a year prior to this, one of the 5 people that were in that downstairs room left the church because of our starting to have affiliated with Rod Parsley, and that was. His name is Joshua. I won't give any other names, but if he ever watches this, he'll know I talked about him. But he left because he had reservations about Rod Parsley, which now obviously you're like, wow, of course you left.
Yeah.
But he was the first one, and as soon as he left, he became the enemy. He was like, well, he just didn't believe in the legacy or the anointing or the vision or the mission. Like, it was whatever word you wanted to put on there. He just didn't believe in it. He just wasn't a true follower. He wasn't a true believer, you know.
He didn't believe in Casper the ghost, the
Didn't believe in Casper, the friendly ghost.
anointing ghost. Okay.
Yeah. And so, so that summer, David's preaching started to get like, I don't want to say that it changed, but it changed enough that I started noticing it. And so it started to get harder. So there'd be like, and I've noticed that his tone has kind of changed a little bit since then, especially from the stuff that you've sent me. So like, if you don't, you'd say stuff, yeah, use a reprobate. Mary, I don't know who that is, but she's really egging us on.
Thank you, Mary.
Yeah, thank you, Mary. Very encouraging. But yeah,
no,
so
she's talking about another video. She's not saying that to you.
Yeah.
No,
That video.
Yeah.
So David, he starts preaching really hard, and like, well, if you don't, you don't clap your hands, you're not saved. If you don't shout, you're not saved. And so he starts using all of this stuff as like a salvation tool. And I'm like, and I talked to my wife, I'm like, this is weird, right? Like, why would you affiliate any of this stuff? Why do you need to have people question if they're saved or not if they don't do these certain things in the church?
So Kim, so Timo says everything became about Rod Parsley, everything became about legacy. And when you hear Timo describe match what you experienced as well?
It does. And it seemed like there was just this big shift all of a sudden, and we were all about Rod Parsley, all about what Rod Parsley thought of us. For instance, we had a couple of the treatment centers, young ladies that would come on our van. We'd go pick them up on the van and bring them. And all of a sudden, he wanted all of them sitting up front because it looked better on camera, things like that. We weren't worried about the people that were actually sitting in the church. It was all about what we look like on camera, what we look like to our online audience. And looking back, I think he was really trying to put impact on the map with Rod Parsley. And again, like I said, like he just became this different person, and his focus was just completely different than it was in the beginning.
Mm-hmm. And you, again, this letter that we're going to show and read here in a little bit, you wrote in the letter to David Amos, one of the excerpts from the letter is, "We heard the name Rod Parsley from the pulpit more than we heard Jesus."
True.
And that's a stunning statement. So what did that look like in real life?
So there was a lot of quotes from Rod Parsley. And so he would say things like, my pastor, Pastor Rod Parsley says, my pastor, Pastor Rod Parsley says. And so most of the sermon would be about that, about quotes from Rod Parsley, and not what the Bible says, what Jesus said in the Bible. And Timo's right. It became a much harsher, his spirit became much harsher in his preaching. And, I know he would sometimes say things like, well, he wanted everybody to stand up. And if somebody didn't stand up, he'd say, well, I bet, if you can't stand up, you might not be saved, things like that.
I gotcha. And Ryan Martin, he's in the I think I know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask you, was there a fee for you to join City Harvest Network, like to become ordained through them?
There was, but mine was actually waived. I don't know how that happened, but David Amos told me that mine was waived. But you were expected to sew in monthly, and it came right out of your bank account.
Okay.
But I think the fee was $100, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was at least $100.
Yeah, I think at one time it was like 125 or 150 to actually get the ordination through them. But then you were required, the churches, I don't know about individuals, so maybe that's good that you're on here for other reasons, obviously, but that the churches were required to send a portion of their tithes and offerings to City Harvest Network every month.
Yes, and so were individuals. You were expected to also sow back into the ministry that has ordained you. But the Wesleyans haven't asked me to do that, just saying.
Well, that might be a nice little moneymaker for World Harvest Church with all of these CHN churches. I don't know how many are a part of CHN now, but at one time when I was still there, it was like 800 churches. And now they say it's like 2,000 in some churches. I don't know how true that is, because there are also people that are ordained by them, and they lie so much you don't really know what's true and what isn't true. And then we're going to talk about this also when we talk about Kevin Campbell, but there's the friends of CHN that aren't actually ordained through them, but they support them in some way.
Right.
Correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So this is, and I'm sorry, everyone, that I'm using excerpts from this letter, but I promise you we are going to show it here in a little bit. So in your letter that you wrote to David Amos, when he was on leave for sexually harassing one of his staff members, and I'm not going to say allegedly because I know too many people have seen the messages, and it was going on for over a year. So becoming a Little World Harvest Church. So this was an excerpt that you had from your letter about Impact Church there in Ironton becoming a Little World Harvest Church. And you said, we were told over and over to be a Little World Harvest Church. So when Impact was told to become like World Harvest Church, did that feel like growth to you, or did it feel like a replacement, or they were trying to make Impact something much different than what it started out to be?
Absolutely. It did feel very different. We opened our services with a Rod Parsley video with the lions, and Rod Parsley's talking in the background. He wanted like a certain look on the stage. He wanted a certain energy. It seemed very awkward to most of us. But again, I mean, I'm just as guilty as anybody else. Like, we just kind of sat around and would look at each other like, what is going on here? But yet we would continue to stay and continue to be there, So, but Timo's right. Joshua was the first to leave. Joshua never, ever, ever had much to say about Rod Parsley that was good. And so he was the first to go. And once he left, because it seems like it kind of stayed at bay a little bit when Joshua was there. And once Joshua left, then it was Katie bar the door. We were all about, that's all we were about, was World Harvest.
Yeah. And it's that part, because that was that around 2019, was that the time frame?
I think it would have been more a little later than that, actually, like
Okay.
after COVID, maybe, or when things
Gotcha.
started opening back up from COVID. I know that
Okay.
I feel like Joshua did leave or right maybe around the time COVID hit. I don't really remember, if I'm honest.
That's okay. That's okay. And I want to just say that in Colossians 1:18, it talks about that God and the Lord is the head of the body and of the church, not Rod Parsley or David Amos or any of these other people that want to be the elite and prop themselves up as if they are better than their congregation or their staff members or the people that they're surrounding themselves with. But they seem to be able to almost indoctrinate people very quickly that this is how we're all going to behave. This is how we're all going to act and treat, this special man, anointed man of God, right? Like that at least was my experience, and the countless other
Mhm.
people that have been on the podcast.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So, Kim, there's something you said in your letter. Again, I keep referencing this letter that I'm not going to show for a little bit. But you wrote this letter to David Amos, and this part stopped me in my tracks, even though I knew it was a thing. To see you put it in writing, I guess, kind of shocked me. You mentioned something in your letter called courtesy falls.
Mm-hmm.
You said that when you heard that term, it shook you because it meant that some of what appeared to be spontaneous moves of God were actually intentional and they were rehearsed.
Yes. I'm
And
so sorry. My dogs are playing.
oh, I don't even hear them.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah. And I want people to understand why that matters, because this isn't about emotional moments. This is about authenticity, integrity, and whether what people are seeing is truly the Holy Spirit or something else. So the excerpt from your letter is, you said that you wrote to David, I think the big turn for me is when you and Blake, and Blake Rice is like David's right-hand man, best friend. They lived next to each other, and he also is employed now by World Harvest Church. But you said, I think the big turn for me is when you and Blake told me about courtesy falls. I couldn't believe that was a thing. So my inclination that some of this was fake was actually correct. So, Kim, in your words, your own words, can you tell us about this interaction and what you were told a courtesy fall was, and how did this affect you spiritually and emotionally?
Sure. So in my gut, I felt, I mean, I already knew that all couldn't be real. But we had gone up, and I think it was a VIP weekend, if I'm not mistaken. And Impact Church was getting the attention of Rod Parsley for sure, and World Harvest Church. And so we were up there, and they had brought David, Blake, and I up on to the stage area, and Pastor Chris had gone up to David, laid his hand on his forehead. David went down. Went up to Blake, laid his hand on his forehead. Blake went down. Put his hand on me. I didn't go down. So, I mean, I really didn't think anything much about it. And on the way home, I was told by, I think David said, have you never heard of a courtesy fall? And I was like, what? And they said, yeah, you've never heard of a courtesy fall? And they were kind of laughing a little bit. And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. And they said, anytime that a man anointed by God puts a hand on you, you go down. And I said, first of all, if you ever want me to go down and fake it, then you best not ever put me on a stage, because I will never do that. And then I said, how do you know? Like, how do you know what's real and what's not if anytime somebody touches you, you go down? Like that just like floored me. And I came home and I was telling my husband about it, and he said, you mean they really came right out and said it? And I said, yeah, they really came right out and said it. And I was just floored, even though in my gut I knew. And that's what I'm saying. Even in your gut, until you hear it or see it for yourself, it's like it can't be true. It can't be what I'm thinking is going on. And so that was a big turn for me, was when they just came right out and told me that if somebody lays their hands on me, I better get down, or something's wrong with me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I'm going to play a clip from Rick Skeens. He did the interview with Everett back in October of 2024, and he actually mentions this. So again, I know that Rick. I saw a picture, and we might show that he was in the picture when you graduated from Valor, and him and his wife are lovely people. And so I'm going to play this clip because he talks about a similar experience.
Don't even have time to get into a whole lot of that, but he came into the picture. But you told me something very interesting about the day that he was ordained or installed or whatever. Could you share that with us before we close out?
Sure. Yeah. We found out a lot of things after we left the church, and people were willing to speak to us openly about things and concerns that they had. When Bishop Amos, Bishop Blake, I guess you would call him, or armor bearer. I don't know these titles, but when he installed him and said that he was going to be his gopher, basically, is what Blake was.
Yeah.
They rehearsed this before church. So, there's just a handful of people around the church before church service. And there were some people back in the sound booth, working. And one of these ladies that was back there was a very, very, very baby Christian. I mean, and I don't mean that to be mean. It's just that she didn't
was just a new Christian.
Yeah, she didn't understand a lot about things that were going on at Impact, and different things going on in the church. But they rehearsed this, and David told Blake that he was going to take a mercy fall, and they rehearsed this big move of God, this big powerful move of God, where Amos is given spiritual authority to Blake, and touches him, and he falls, and they people saw this. Now, if you have to rehearse something like this, it's probably not okay. I believe that God works and does different things in different ways, but not in a way that you have to rehearse it.
And is that your term, or just a term, mercy fall, or did Amos call it? Did he say, Blake, you got to take a mercy fall, or you're just describing it that way? I
honestly don't know. I've heard David say mercy fall before, like telling me I was going to take one, and I was like, okay.
Well, I don't know if you know this, but Jesus, in the 11th chapter of John, they couldn't get that stone right, so they had to rehearse that 2 or 3 times, and then when they finally got it right, the camera was wrong. I don't know if you know that, Rick, but like and Lazarus was like, dude, I haven't had anything to.
Everett's being funny there. So
Yes.
Rick says that David told Blake he was going to take a mercy fall, and they rehearsed this big move of God where David touches him and he falls. What Rick is describing and what you experience is something that was fabricated to elicit emotion from the audience, which is manipulation. And this matters deeply because scripture makes it very clear that God is not a God of deception or performance. 1 Corinthians 14:33 says, "For God is not the author of confusion, but of peace, And 2 Corinthians 4:2 says, we refuse to practice cunning or to tamper with God's word. If something is rehearsed to appear supernatural, that raises serious questions. So, Kim, before you learned about courtesy falls, did you believe those moments were genuine moves of God?
Yes and no. I mean, I believe some of them maybe were, but like I said, I knew. I mean, I knew there was no way because I was at one service where, I can't remember the guy's name. But anyway, he was just, all he was doing was waving his hand and people were falling. And I'm like, there's no way. I mean, there's just no way. And I was there with David and I looked at David. I said, this is just chaotic. Like, this just isn't right. And he was like, no, it's great, and it just, no, I don't think they were. I will say in David's defense that he did put his hand on my forehead at one time and I did go down, and that was real. I would have not faked that. I was out. I felt very discombobulated for quite some time afterwards. So do I believe it happens? I absolutely do believe it happens, but I believe it's very fake there for most part.
Yeah. Yeah. And I saw that in your letter where you talked about the courtesy fall, but you also acknowledged that you had this experience with him personally where he laid his hands on you and that was real to you.
Mhm.
Now and I'm not discounting that at all, but impartation is real and it can be positive and it can also be negative, right?
Sure.
At World
Absolutely.
Harvest, they only talk about the positive impartation, but you can impart negative spirits as well.
Sure.
So that's a real thing. But was that one of the moments that made you begin to question everything?
The courtesy fall?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So one of the fruits of the Holy Spirit is truth. Jesus said in John 8:32, then you will know the truth and the truth will set you free. When people discover that some things were presented as spontaneous moves of God, but they were actually rehearsed, that creates spiritual confusion, disillusionment, and harm, especially for sincere believers who are seeking God. Did
Right.
you ever encounter people being disillusioned other than yourself and your family? Did you encounter anyone else being disillusioned by this fakeness?
Oh, sure. I would say probably 50, 60% of the church.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
And do you know if they stuck around?
No, most people had left or left shortly after I did. Honestly, like it's like we stuck around because we were such a family and we loved each other, and we
Mhm.
we kind of felt like we were like in this mess like together, and so I think that's why we held out. And I don't know. I guess we kind of stayed for the wrong reasons, maybe. Well, for me, I stayed till God told me to go, and then I
Yeah.
went.
Wow. Oh, I didn't realize that it was so much of the church that had, sort of experienced what was presented as real, but everybody else knew that it was rehearsed or fake or and that's why I'm playing some of these old clips from 2024 that Everett did from other people that you're aware of because obviously it's corroborating what everyone is saying, not that we don't believe you, but this is crazy to hear. Even me who hears stuff like this on a regular basis, it's crazy to hear that anybody would feel like they needed to impersonate these moves of God. Why can't you just let God move?
Well, it's funny that you say that because there were two young ladies that went to Valor that I was very, very close to, and both of their stories were told at two different times from the stage. I think one was a Valor service, and I think the other was at DCM. But their stories were both exaggerated. And the second one, I just really kind of lost it. And I lashed out on Facebook. I don't ever do that, but I just put, why aren't God's miracles enough that we need to exaggerate them even further? Like, what God does is a mighty move of God, and we need to just leave it at that, something along those lines. And I immediately got a phone call from David, and he said, "Hey, you're on speakerphone and Blake's here." Like, okay. And I said, "Why would you do that? Like, you totally exaggerated that story." And he said, "With all the people I deal with, it's going to happen that I'm going to forget some details or get some details messed up." And I said, "Well, if you don't know somebody's story, then don't tell it. I mean, it's just that simple." And but that's how I felt too. God performs miracles every day. I'm one sitting here. I know you are too. And so why isn't that enough? Why do we have to exaggerate? One of the young ladies, she had been in the the psych ward for I think like 4 or 5 days, and he said she was in there for a year. And we were like, what?
Oh, man.
Yeah, it was a big exaggeration.
Yeah. Well, and we've over the last, month or 6 weeks, we've seen other people that are very closely, highly connected to Rod Parsley, where they have unbelievable testimonies just as they are, but we've uncovered that they've added all of this fakeness and downright lies to make the story so extravagant. And it's like, why
Right.
do you feel like that is so necessary? I mean, one of the guys got shot in the face. Okay. Like, why do you have to say that it was a drug deal gone bad when it was actually one of your family members and it was an accident? I mean, why do they feel the need to lie about everything?
Yeah, I don't know. And that's one reason I'm doing this, because I just want David to see, like, he's not doing what God's called him to do. He's just not. God didn't call anybody to do this.
No, that's right. That's exactly right. What is being done is criminal, it's abusive, it's manipulative, and it affects people very negatively. I haven't talked to anybody that walks away from that place and says, "Boy, what a great experience that was." Nobody.
I'm sure. Yeah.
So now we're going to sort of move on to the shunning and the loyalty control. And I'm going to play a clip from Timo on Everett's program. And one of the most consistent patterns reported by former insiders or staff members or congregation members that were highly connected is what happens when someone leaves. So I'm going to play this clip from Timo, and then I'm going to ask you a question after.
God loves a cheerful giver. I happily gave it. And that
you gave us unto the Lord, but it was a large amount. I'm sorry. In anybody's life, an $11,000 gift. And besides, and it's also something extremely useful for the ministry. So when you felt like it was time to leave, of course, Bishop Amos and all those guys got together and went out of their way to tell you how much they appreciated all that you have done. And they wanted to make sure that you knew that they really wanted the best that God had for you going forward. And they probably took up a love offering for you, right?
So after I resigned and left the church, myself and my whole family, we were effectively ghosted by the entire church. People would not talk to us. People would not acknowledge our presence. And so I was, to be honest with you, I was shunned like everyone else. But to be honest with you, the shunning didn't start until a month later. I realized that I have some convictions. and these convictions need to be aired. And so I wrote a very long post on Facebook, which it's still there, but I've locked it so no one can see it except for myself. Basically airing out, this is why I left. I called him out on his sin. I said, you shouldn't do this from the platform. You shouldn't do that from the platform. You need to get in line with the scripture, blah. So I called him out. And that's what caused him. He blocked me on Facebook. The other ministers blocked me on Facebook. The other ministers ended up just really not talking to me. And I'm sure he was able to spin the story because all of people I'll name the name, but I have no opinion on him now, but Brandon Honeycutt, which is one of our overseers, they just they took David's side and went away. Like there was no, maybe the pastor's wrong. Nope. It's only the people that leave that are wrong. Like it's crazy. It's just crazy.
Right. So, well, you wrote that letter, so you touched God's anointed. Probably, let's just be honest, Timo, right now, your wife hates you.
So Timo says, after I left, the entire church ghosted me. I was blocked. No one spoke to me. Did you observe similar treatment towards people who left? And were you there when Timo actually left Impact Church?
I was there. And I never blocked Timo. I was a pastor there and I did not block Timo. Timo and I were not really close. And in all honesty, David kind of made this situation. He brought Timo in and made him elder, and the rest of us elders and pastors had never met the man. I mean, we knew him because he did give to the church. He gave very generously to the church, and he was in the military, so they were moving to Kentucky from Hawaii, and we're going to be involved with Impact Church, and he was going to be an elder, but we never got to meet him. So this man, he literally flew in like 30 minutes before our ordination service. And so we were like, hi, nice to meet you. We're going to be, ordained together as elders. And so we never really got a chance to really know Timo or know how Timo operated and so forth. So David kind of created that scenario. Instead of bringing him in and saying, you need to get to know these people, before you're an elder and that kind of thing. So I hate that. Looking back at it, we were kind of encouraged, I guess, to not have anything to do with Timo. I did not block the man myself, but looking back on it, that was very, very wrong. And when I left, David was already in Columbus full time. Rick was the pastor. There was some other leadership there that I didn't really get along with, honestly. And we were in a leadership meeting. And I was the one that was over the recovery ministry there. We had a recovery service that was growing, and it was very, successful on successful terms as a recovery service can be. And I was told that our people could not bring backpacks into the church anymore. They would have to be left at the door. And that's when I was out. Because I'm like, people in recovery, they carry everything they own in a backpack. That's just what they do, Mm-hmm. And so that's when I left. That's when I knew it was time to go.
Yeah. And that's so unfortunate. I don't know if we're going to really get into this, but I grew up down there. I was born in Ironton, Ohio. And when I was born there was a little bit more industry going on in that area in the 80s. But even at that point, a lot of the iron companies had already shut down. And so, but even the hospital I was born at, Ironton General, it shut down. But I say that to say, that's a very destitute area. And yes. Unfortunately, there is a lot of drug addiction in that area. Mm-hmm. When the pill mills and the opiate crisis was going on, Scioto County was one of the major cities in Ohio. Like, I think one of the biggest cities in Ohio for the pill mills. Yes. And that whole area it has been ravaged. I mean, people I went to school with have overdosed, they're in prison, they've killed people so that they can continue their addiction. But this is an area that could benefit from love, compassion, and a recovery services program at a local church
Right.
with people that know about recovery.
Right.
And they don't want to deal with it anymore because it doesn't fit into their little box anymore. It doesn't look good on camera anymore, whatever the case is. But this could have very positively impacted that area for the better.
Yes, absolutely. And at that time, Rick was now the pastor. And I do want to make it clear that it wasn't Rick. It was some of the other leadership. It was not Rick.
Yeah. Yeah. Rick and Jessica and Timo. I mean, everyone seems to be, they have the right heart. They're good people. They love God. They're trying to do the right thing. But unfortunately, if they have aligned themselves with Rod Parsley, World Harvest Church, City Harvest Network, they're required to operate a certain way. And they're going to be told, it's going to come down the pike of what they can and cannot do.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, Miss Kim, we're moving on again. This this is one of the photos you sent me that my eyes probably got as big as saucers when you sent me this. So I actually worked at World Harvest during this time frame that this happened. Now, I've never seen this picture until you sent it to me, and I was actually shocked that David would undermine his so-called very best friend this way. But I'm gonna show the picture, and then I want you to, and maybe we'll both talk about this. So I'm going to add this. I'm going to make it big too. So I'm going to have you tell us about this, but I remember this situation very, it's clear in my brain because David had been in my office because I was the HR director at the time. He had come to me and said that Rod Parsley and the head leadership didn't really, they weren't super fond of Blake. He could tell that they were treating him sort of badly. And David was actually that was one of the times where I felt like David was actually being a real person, and he was upset, and he even had tears in his eyes, everything, like, I don't know what to do. I talked him into taking this job, and now he's being treated this way. And then subsequently, Blake came to me and said that his wife was very unhappy with how much time that he was away from home because he was still, living back in Kentucky and making the commute to Columbus.
Mm-hmm.
And it was causing a lot of issues in his marriage. He didn't like how he was being treated, and he had decided he was going to quit. But he was also concerned, how would this look on David? But Blake was crying, like he was upset. So when David sent you this, what message did you believe he was communicating to you, or did he enlighten you of what this picture was, or what this meme was that he created?
Well, it was kind of odd because at this time that he sent this to me, we weren't really talking very much at all. And it kind of got sent to me kind of out of the blue. I had heard that Blake, and I really don't even know who or where I heard it, but I had heard that Blake had left and that he was trying to go back, because I remember thinking, oh, is he just glutton for punishment? You know, what would make you want to go back? And then just kind of out of the blue, I was sent this meme via text message, and I thought, man, that's bad taste, you know, because they've been friends forever, ever.
They were childhood best friends,
Yes.
right? And
Yes.
they even bought houses right next to each other there in Ashland, Kentucky, or somewhere there close to Ashland, Kentucky.
Yes.
So that they could live right next door to each other. I mean, they were best friends.
Yes.
And they seem to be back on good terms. They're taking their courtesy falls together.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Because Blake Blake did go back. Now, that was after I had already left. So I was shocked when I found out Blake was back, because obviously of our interaction. So when David sent this to you, did you believe that leaving was viewed as a betrayal?
Kind of. I mean, again, one reason that I sent this to you is I just feel like this wasn't something David would have done 10 years before. You know what I mean? It's just like he changed, like something was different. He was always, him and Blake were just always so loyal to each other that it really shocked me that he sent this to me.
Wow. Well, maybe Grace has an HR department now, Miss Kim.
Maybe so. I hope so.
Oh my gosh, goodness sakes. I was shocked. Again, I was shocked when you sent me that, because again, Blake and David were like this. I mean, that you would almost think that they were brothers. That's how close they were.
Yes. Always.
And for your brother to not only create a meme, but to be making fun of you behind your back, like, no, you can't quit your job and then ask for your job back and send it out to people. I mean, I don't know. To me, it's not just bad taste, right? It's zero integrity. It's disgusting.
And I have no idea if I'm the only one he sent that to, if he sent it to multiple people. I have no idea. But I did think it was very interesting that he sent it to me, because we weren't really, it had been long enough to where we weren't really that close anymore.
Yeah. And that's, I'm sure you weren't the only one that received it.
Probably not.
I'm sure. Okay. So I want to sort of switch now to the financial culture, and I have another clip from Brother Rick Skeens, who interviewed with Everett, and this clip is actually a little bit longer. I think it's about 9 minutes long, but I want to talk about some of the things that he talks about, because I believe you would have been still connected to Impact at that time, but you can correct me if I'm wrong. So let me pull this up.
What did you discover once you were put in the lead position? Because you kind of made a pretty major discovery, did you not?
Yeah. So, the finance pastor, whatever he called her, he was telling her the church had two separate bank accounts at that time.
Okay.
And he was telling her that the account that we opened at PNC Bank when we started the church.
When you first started the church.
Very first started the church. That's the one we were operating out of. But he said that he and one other person were the only people that had access to that account. So it made sense. He manipulated her to think that it made sense to close that account out completely and move everything over to the credit union where we had financed the building, because we bought the building in the process of all this.
Yes.
So alarm bells, red flags go up because one, I know that's not true. I know that you don't just close out an account and move everything because it's more convenient. That's not the way you do stuff.
Right.
So, time goes on. I mean, we're talking about weeks here, if not a month and a half or more, where we have a bank account sitting that I have no access to as the lead pastor of the church.
Right.
As the lead pastor of the church, I'm legally responsible for what's going into that account and what's being spent out of it. So we have no records, no anything. Our tithing from online tithing is still going into that account. So, every now and then he would kick us a check to deposit into the credit union account. And I'm just not okay with any of this, right? So Jessica and I go to the bank and we tell them what's going on. Like, we need to know, I tell them I'm the new pastor of the church. The old pastor is not there anymore. And we need to get access to this account. So they look it up, and myself and her were still on the account from years ago. We gave it up in 2019. This was 2022.
3 years later.
3 years later. We were
So
still
let's just wait. Stop right there. You guys had positions. You stayed part of the church through the ups and downs and the weirdisms and all of that. But in 2019, you both resigned your positions. You were, Jessica, you were operating as treasurer. Rick, you were operating as executive pastor, administrative stuff. And so you're just backed off. We're just attendees of the church. And now it's 3 years later, and you're discovering that there's a bank account that nobody has any knowledge of or access to. And have I got it right so far?
Yeah, I mean, there have been people, there's a succession of people that did have access to it, but after we gave it up, but it was the person that David chose to do the finances. And
Right.
like we know.
But you come in as lead pastor, and you're about to discover something when you ask for those bank records. And what was it that you discovered?
So we found out that not only was our name still on the account, and that the person who David told the finance pastor was on the account along with him was never on the account. So that was just a flat out lie. That was just not true. We found out that I still had a debit card for the church, which I gave back in 2019 because I had no need for it. It was the Impact Church card, but it had my name on it.
Right.
That card was still active in 2022. Not only was it still active, it was actively being used.
But
by someone
without your knowledge.
By someone that was not me. So we started looking. I was only concerned with, at that time, I'd been pastor for about 2 months. So I was only concerned with, honey.
Yep.
I was only concerned with the last 2 months of transactions, So we had him print off a couple months of transactions, statements for the account. And what I saw blew my mind. I mean, really, literally blew my mind. There was, first of all, I would say probably 95% of these transactions were in Columbus. And maybe the other 5 were on their way to Columbus.
Right.
I mean, there was restaurants on there for a couple $100, $200-300, multiple ones of those. Starbucks, which, everybody has their own opinion. I personally don't buy Starbucks. And, I was telling our congregation why they shouldn't buy Starbucks. Well, here these boneheads are charging Starbucks on our church credit card. On my card, while I'm telling people they shouldn't do it, for personal convictions.
And maybe it's just a nitpicky little point because it's ridiculous, because it sounds like somebody's using Impact Church money, and Impact Church money has no idea it's being used that way at all, and it's not even being used for Impact Church stuff. But are you talking about $200 or $300 total of restaurant charges, or like picking up the tab for a big group of people at least sometimes? Or
oh no, I mean it was $200-300 in one hit multiple times.
Okay.
Yeah.
At a Brazilian steakhouse.
At a different places, but Boar and Barrel, a very expensive steakhouse up around Canal Winchester.
Now, Mr. Rick, I'm going to stop you. So multiple times, and you're talking about larger amounts, $200 or $300 at expensive, pretty fancy places like Brazilian Steakhouse. And this is your debit card, or it's the church's debit card, but it's got your name on it from 3 years ago. You don't even know that it exists. The church people don't know that this is happening. And Rick, I just got to ask you, is that the way the average person in Ironton lives? Is goes out and no big deal. I'll pick up, $300 worth of dinner orders at a Brazilian steakhouse. Is that the way Ironton lives?
We don't have a Brazilian.
Brother, we don't have a Brazilian steakhouse in this area. I mean, there are people that live, very realistically, on $700-800 a month, in this area.
Yeah.
So to think that someone could go just blow $300-400, $200-300, and I don't even know what was on those prior to April. This was just 2 months of things, and this was.
So wait, this is all stuff that was going on while you were the pastor?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that he had a U-Haul, I'm say U-Haul, but like a moving truck from where he was personally moving from here to Columbus. That was on there. I mean, I know that later I found that
gas.
Yeah, Circle Gas. I mean, all kinds of Walmart up there in Canal Winchester, personal stuff. And
this was during even you didn't even look from before you came on board. You're talking about since you came on board.
Yes.
And all of this is going on. You don't know about it. The church members don't know about it. And it's not even him making decisions to benefit Impact Church. Who is it? Who was that money being spent to benefit? Who got a benefit out of that money that he was spending?
The people that was charging.
The people that were eating the Brazilian steakhouse. I mean, the people going to Boar and Barrel and living it up on Starbucks, I guess. It wasn't me. I will say, and I'm not the only one. Appalachia has a lot of pastors that don't get paid. So I'm not tooting my own horn here, but we didn't get paid to be the pastor because we knew that the people that were the backbone of that church, like my mom, who gave a lot of money to Impact Church for Amos to go live it up in Columbus and try to impress these CHN guys in Parsley. I know I found out later after we left the church that he bought Parsley a $300 pair of Yeezys for a gift out of the church.
What are Yeezys?
It's shoes like just a $300 pair of shoes, tennis shoes. So,
how many people in Ironton walk around in $300 shoes?
Can't even buy them here, man. I mean, that's how.
Did you know any of that, Kim?
I heard it after the fact. That actually all happened after I had already left.
Yeah. Yes. And I was going to show this Yeezys like Kanye West. Yes. So Rod Parsley wears very expensive sneakers, watches, everything he has is very expensive. And what Rick was saying was that David Amos still had a church credit card, an Impact Church debit card, I guess, with Rick's name on it. And David was using it to buy these $300 dinners, buy Rod Parsley $300 pairs of shoes, pay for his moving truck from Kentucky to Columbus, going and buying things, personal things at Walmart. So he's effectively using tithes and offerings that should be spent on Impact Church and their people or to help the community. And David Amos, with no shame, is spending it on dinners for himself, impressing people, buying Rod Parsley gifts.
That's what he said. Yeah.
And did you observe financial pressure to give when you were at Impact or with City Harvest Network?
No, I mean, Dave and I have always been tithers. So, I mean, we always tithed and offered, anything. God blessed us greatly. And so we were givers. So it wasn't really a thing. Like, we gave as we were given to God, and what happened after that was between
Okay.
them and God. Yeah.
Okay. Did you notice that that David's lifestyle appeared to change once he started being more involved with City Harvest and World Harvest?
Not really, because I think most of it maybe happened in Columbus, and I wasn't up there with him that much.
Okay.
They had jobs where he and his wife both made good money, and they lived in a very nice neighborhood. So I didn't really notice that. I do know that there were gifts sent to Miss Charisse and to Ashton that the church paid for. We did a personalized pillow with Miss Charisse's cat on it and sent that to her when her cat died. And we did a blanket with Ashton's grandmother on it and sent to her for, I think, just because. I don't think there was any real reason.
Just to impress people, not because now your guys' heart might have been in the right place, but I mean, what were you thinking when they told you had to have a pillow made with this lady's dead cat on it?
I thought it was very strange myself. But like I said, we were moving towards this, like trying to get the attention of Impact Church into Columbus. So, and it worked, it seemed to work.
Well, I'm going to read another excerpt, and we're going to get to your letter here soon, but I want to read an excerpt from your letter. And you said, then there were the pictures of the expensive motel rooms, private jet, cars. Meanwhile, I'm working with people in the trenches who don't know how they are going to eat today. Dave, meaning Dave, your husband, not David Amos, was disgruntled too, but I kept asking him to hang in there and that it would get better.
Yeah, so we were often sent pictures or videos of David, like certain cars that would get rented when he would go pick Pastor Parsley up from different places. The private jet. I know one particular instance, they were staying somewhere in Orlando. I think it was actually a Disney property, and the motel rooms were like $1,800 a night. They had like TVs in the mirrors in the bathroom and the whole 9 yards. And he did like a video walkthrough. And Dave and I were like, oh my gosh. And he said, well, they didn't pay that's not what they paid for them. They didn't pay $1,800 a night, but that's what they would be for anybody else, but they bought so many of them that they got them for a better price. And he actually told that in the pulpit, and a lot of people at Impact were very disgruntled over that. And he said to us, because my Dave and I met with him shortly after that sermon, and he said to us, I knew I shouldn't have said that in the pulpit. I knew I shouldn't have, but it just came out.
Well, he's acting like Daddy Rod. You know what I'm saying? I mean, these guys, they are taking all of the tithes and offerings, and it's their own personal piggy bank. That's how they're buying the mansions. That's how they're buying the private jets. That's how they're buying the luxury cars and the $1,000 suits that they only wear once. I mean, this is how they operate, but then they pass it off as them being that's how you can tell that they're anointed by God, and because they're being so blessed financially by God. But it's your money, it's my money, it's everybody's money that's supporting their lifestyle. it's robbery.
Yeah, and you know, another big problem is we have people come in, like we've talked about, Ironton is a poor area. We have people
Yeah.
come in, they don't know that Impact Church funds did not pay for that $1,800 motel room. You know, they don't know that. And here they are, they don't know how they're going to eat, they don't know how they're going to pay their rent, they don't know how they're going to pay, you know, their car insurance. And meanwhile, we have a pastor that's staying in $1,800 a night motel rooms, and it doesn't compute in Appalachia.
Well, and bragging about it from the
Yeah.
platform.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. So that was tough.
Oh, it makes me so mad. It makes me so mad. I could do just a episode on that, the actual impact of that behavior in a city like Ironton, Ohio, and the people that are in that city. I mean, it boils my blood. It boils my blood. That's all I can say. When I heard that initially, when Everett did that podcast, I was ready. I was actually ready to do an episode on that specifically, and then I think something else happened with Rod, and then I had to do that instead. But it's just mind blowing. Okay. We got a couple more things, Kim. I thought we were going to be done in an hour and a half. It don't look like it's happening.
It's okay.
So I want to talk now about Kevin Campbell. And we sort of talked about him in the beginning, but this is someone that I had close ties to because he was the pastor at my dad's church for many years. And you also know him and his family. And Kevin was actually, it sounds like, one of the only pastors in that area that would really give David Amos a shot once he came back from Texas, and he was trying or appeared to be trying to save his first marriage, and then he was caught having another affair, which is why he had to leave Texas. And Kevin has always, to my knowledge, pastored Nazarene churches, and David Amos could not get ordained by the Nazarene church because he would not go through the restoration process that the Nazarene church was requiring. So, I want to talk, I guess it'll make sense that we're talking about this, but I have another clip from Rick, and this is kind of a compilation of several things that he said. And, but I want to play it, and then I want to show that even though I know Kevin Campbell is a great man of God, he is a great pastor, he made a huge impact on me, and he did my son's baby dedication, but he is now supporting Rod Parsley and David Amos publicly, on at least on social media. And he goes and participates in some of these services at World Harvest Church. And we're talking as recently as like February 3rd or February 5th, he posted something in support of Rod Parsley and David Amos. So I'm going to play this, and then we'll talk about it briefly.
Let's just keep going, or this is going to last till midnight. You mentioned Kevin Campbell, and Kevin Campbell at Intersection Church seems to have been, and probably still is, but just a real stand-up guy with a huge heart.
Very.
He is. I'm actually completing my. I'm getting ready to finish my master's degree in pastoral counseling, so I'm completing that with Pastor Kevin.
Oh wow!
So I'm very thankful for him, and just his heart, because he literally has a heart of service for everyone. Truly loves God and truly loves people.
He does.
Can say that about him for sure.
And was he kind and helpful to David Amos?
Very.
Kevin Campbell is the reason that Amos is in ministry right now. Because there are people that would not allow David to ever
Behind the pulpit.
don the pulpit again.
Because of the experience in Texas and then the affair in Ashland, or all of that, or is there something else?
I think all the above, and by and far, people knew who. It doesn't take long to be around him before you know who he is and you know how he operates. And I mean, there's just not very much that Amos puts his hands on that doesn't turn to, a doo-doo storm, if you will.
Okay. Yeah. So Pastor Kevin Campbell is very gracious to Guy, gives him some opportunity and invests in him and gives him a chance that you say probably nobody else would. How did David Amos repay that, or how did he respond in kind? What was the net result of that?
So Amos, the intersection. Let me qualify, by saying that the intersection was more of a compassionate ministry than it ever was really a church. And that was Kevin's vision. He had pastored large churches and got kind of jaded by the religiosity and the routine of things. And, he genuinely wanted to have a group of people that would worship together, serve together. And that's what he had, a core group of people that would go out to the streets of Ashland and hand out hot and ready pizzas.
Hot and ready.
Getting that hot and ready. He made a song.
So kind of like a mission station, like way back in the old days, more like a Salvation Army kind of.
Yeah.
I got you.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So, David comes along and he starts seeing his opportunity to manipulate and to, he calls it leadership, but it is glorified manipulation. But that's what it is.
Yeah.
And he starts, playing his games and shaming everybody that wouldn't show up to meetings that he would call spontaneously, and just doing his old antics. Once again, only he wasn't allowed to be in ministry in this church. It was a Nazarene church, so he was not allowed to be a pastor, an executive pastor, or any eldership at all in this church. He was not allowed to hold.
And that was because of what happened in Texas, and because of his refusal to go through any kind of restoration process that the Texas district mandated. Is that your understanding?
Right, you're right. I don't know what they offered to do for him before he left Texas. They may have offered to do. I'm assuming they probably did offer restoration, but they moved back here. Okay. But they took membership along with myself at the intersection. He and his wife took membership at the intersection, and in that denomination, the process goes, if you have credentials, then they have to go through a whole different thing for you to take membership in a Nazarene church. So that's when they started talking back and forth with the Nazarene church in Texas, the district in Texas, about restoration. And they finally offered him restoration. I think that it was unreasonable.
Yeah.
And Kim, I'm just going to go through this just for the sake of time. I love Rick, but again, I want to make sure that we're not holding people here all night. But Rick goes on to say that Kevin Campbell was the one that supported David and gave him opportunities when no one else would. But since David Amos did not want to go through the restoration process through the Nazarene church, and he wanted to pastor a church, he ended up going to City Harvest Network and able to get his ordination through there. And Kevin Campbell was actually one of those 5 guys in the basement that he talks about starting Impact Church. But Rick also goes on to say that most of the financial support and people that were at Intersection, which was Kevin's ministry, David took all of them to Impact, and so Intersection ended up losing most of the financial backing, and it was now behind Impact. And that ministry, that Intersection ministry that Kevin had, was no longer.
So that was before my time, and I just
Yeah.
know I have heard a couple of different stories about that. I had heard that, Kevin was going to be part of Impact, and then I heard that somehow his retirement was tied to the Nazarene Church. So if he did that, he was going to lose all his retirement. I had actually heard several different stories on that. So I don't really know what was true.
So, and that's okay. I guess my because we both know Kevin, it sounds like, there was manipulation on David Amos's part, that that David Amos saw his opportunity with City Harvest Network, which was completely opposite of the Nazarene church, of their belief system, how they operate, all of those things. And so David Amos sort of goes the Rod Parsley route, gets the CHN ordination, starts Impact Church, and Kevin loses that Intersection ministry. But now we've got Kevin Campbell here, September 20th, 2025, taking pictures with Rod Parsley with City Harvest Network in the background. And we've got, let's see, I think he just posted this February 3rd, when Amos did the podcast with Rod Parsley. And I'm showing this because I've said this before. If you align or affiliate with the so-called pastors that have been proven to be manipulating, they abuse, they take advantage of, and this isn't just me saying it or you saying it. We're talking a litany of people that are coming out against World Harvest Church, Rod Parsley, his leadership, David Amos even. And why would somebody with such integrity, such a stand-up person and pastor like Kevin Campbell, why would he openly support these guys?
I wish I knew. I love Kevin. Kevin was there for me when I was heavily drinking before I got sober. He was always very supportive of me, and I really don't have an answer. I don't.
Man, were you surprised when you saw Kevin supporting Rod Parsley?
Yes, I was. At first, I felt like he was just trying to be a friend to David. And I thought in my head, he probably doesn't really agree with what's going on, but he's just coming up here to support David when David first went up there. But now I don't know, because it's been, several years. So I don't know.
I'm shocked. I mean, I was absolutely shocked. And I, in fact, have tried to reach out to him several times just on, Facebook, just to ask him some questions. And unfortunately, he hasn't, responded. And that's okay. Like, he doesn't owe me an explanation, but I guess it's more of like a warning that he, and maybe I'm wrong here. Maybe I'm the person that needs to get checked. I don't know. And it's certainly not man worship, but I mean, I love Pastor Kevin and his family, and they were always who you saw in public was who they were behind closed
Yes.
doors. There was never anything put on about them. They had the utmost integrity. And I guess my warning is stop affiliating with these guys, because anybody in his current congregation, if they know about Rod Parsley and David Amos and they are paying attention, they are going to question why he is even supporting people like them.
Yeah, good point.
Man. Okay. Now I'm finally going to read this letter, Kim.
Okay.
Okay. Let me pull this up. So this is the letter that, and I'm going to actually read off of my copy, but this is a letter that you sent to David in October of 2024. I highlighted that. And this was actually, I believe, when he was on leave from World Harvest Church for sexually harassing his staff member, and for over a year, by the way. But I'm going to read this, and then I've got a couple of questions for you, and then we'll be done. Okay. So you say, Dear David, I'm typing this letter instead of handwriting it because I can't bend my neck. Also, because I think you had surgery or
Yes.
something like that, right?
Yes.
You say, also, I have prayed literally almost a year about this letter, and I feel like God is telling me now is the time. Every bit of this is coming from a place of love, and I hope you understand that. You told me about a month ago that I was the one person you would tell the truth to, so here goes. When I first started at Impact, it was different. I mean, really different. It was like a family, and I felt that it was a perfect place for me to heal after the bout with alcoholism. We did life together. That small group at your house was one of my fondest memories. The mega trunk or treat was another. We were pretty transparent about our faults, and it was an amazing group of people. However, as I have looked back, things certainly changed. You talked a little about it on the phone. Slowly, we were becoming something very different than the original Impact. We were told over and over to be a Little World Harvest Church. Why? Wasn't the vision to be Impact Church? We became worried about what we looked like online, telling people where to sit or stand. Jim was literally knocking into people to get camera shots. We heard the name Rod Parsley from the pulpit more than we heard Jesus. Then Timo was brought in as an elder, and we had never met him. That was a fiasco from the start. Then Angie and David were announced as prophetess and pastor from the pulpit without us knowing that was going to take place. No longer did recovery people seem welcome, and we were talking about holding bags at the door at our recovery service. The rest of us were not without fault either. I certainly let sin creep into my life, which affected the church, and I know I wasn't the only one. I praise God that I came to Impact. If I hadn't and didn't meet you, I probably would have never gone to college or became a pastor. You saw things in me that I didn't see in myself, and I'm now and will forever be grateful for that. When you first started going to Columbus, I remember you coming back really pumped up and talking about how the meetings were. You told me a few examples of PRP saying things like, if you don't get this done, heads are going to roll, and I'm the only one who makes the decisions around here. That never seemed right to me, but when I visited World Harvest Church, PRP, that's Pastor Rod Parsley, was always very kind and hospitable to me, so I brushed it off. I loved many of the services there, but some were just too fake to me. I battled with that a lot. I think the big turn for me is when you and Blake told me about Courtesy Falls. I couldn't believe that was a thing, so my inclination that some of this was fake was actually correct. You had put hands on me once, and I fell out and was incoherent for a hot minute. That was real. I have no doubt it was. So how do we know what is real and what isn't if there is such a thing as Courtesy Falls? Then there was the pictures of the expensive motel rooms, private jets, cars. Meanwhile, I'm working with people in the trenches who don't know how they are going to eat today. So here's what I feel I need to tell you. Run. Get your family out of there and go follow your true calling. You are absolutely called by God. You are a dynamic preacher and people respond to you, but you got to tear away all the junk and get back to what is real. friend, it breaks my heart to see you all up in that mess. I mean, honestly. And Savannah, geez. Savannah was, just to kind of stop here for a moment, Savannah was a Valor student, but she came from Impact Church, but she was
Mhm.
working in the CHN office with David. I actually interviewed her for that job.
Mhm.
When she is home, she is constantly on edge about work. It's very hard to watch her. She has opportunities here to do some nitty gritty, hands on. Turning the page, nitty gritty, hands on ministry, or just to get some rest. But she's so afraid to put that phone down, even when she's not working. I pray for all of you, Blake's crew too. I have heard things like you have said you want to leave, but are used to the lifestyle, and that you are trapped up there. I have no idea if that's true or not. Frankly, it really doesn't matter. What I know is that God will bless your obedience to follow his voice and do what he is asking you to do. I guarantee it is not what you are doing now. I have no idea what happened up there with you. Again, it doesn't matter. I wonder if this time out happen so that God could tell you what he really wants. In those quiet moments, is he really telling you to go back to CHN or World Harvest and continue doing what you're doing? Or is he telling you to strip it all away? Child, let's start over. I pray this letter does not anger you, because that in no way is my intent. I can also tell you from my own personal experience that once you are away from that kind of ministry, you can't believe you were ever sucked into it. The freedom you feel is unbelievable. I love you, Amy and Trinity, very much. Enough that I have prayed about this for almost a year. Your name is in the prayer box at church multiple times because I see you online and I worry for you all. I will continue to pray that you start shopping for some running shoes sooner than later. Love you so much, Kim G. Wow. That
Yeah.
actually made me tear up, because I can feel, not just the sincerity, but like the real love and care, right,
Mhm.
that you have for David and his family. So, did David ever respond to you after you sent him that letter?
He did. He called me almost immediately.
And what did he say? Do you mind sharing?
I don't mind sharing. He told me that I was 100% right, but if he left then, that he was not guilty of what was being said about him, and if he left then, that he would be, that people would think he was guilty. And my response was, "Who cares? What do you care what they think?"
They had the proof. They had the proof that he was guilty,
Yeah.
right?
Well, he also said that, oh gosh, it was on the tip of my tongue and now I've forgotten. Shoot.
I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. He also said, oh, I know what it was, that they had always thought that they would be there forever, and that it had become apparent to them that they were probably just going to be there for a season.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Wow. And I, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't he make some insinuation? And maybe this was a different conversation, because I never had you answer me on whether he responded or not. But he made some comment about his wife being used to the lifestyle, so he couldn't leave now, or something to that effect.
That's something, one of the girls that went to Impact Church that still, I believe, still keeps in touch with him. At the time, she was keeping in touch with him. She actually came to the church that I pastor at now, and that's what she told me. She told me that he had said that Amy
Okay.
was used to it, and so they couldn't leave.
Wow. What gave you the clarity and courage to leave when you finally did?
There was just so many things that were going south for me. But the straw that broke the camel's back was the backpacks. Holding the backpacks at the door at a recovery service, and I thought, I can't, like, I have to follow God's calling for me, not David Amos's calling for me. And so it just
Amen.
became like it was just a loud voice saying, you got to go. It's time to go. And so I left and I never looked back. And
Wonderful.
it was probably, I held the CHN ordination just because I didn't really think about it. I was visiting churches. I didn't really know what I was going to do. And I finally got a phone call from David at some point wanting to know, he knew I was getting ordained through the Wesleyan Church, and he asked me if I wanted to keep both ordinations. And I was very gracious and kind about it. And I was like, no, it's time. It is just time for me to be done with CHN. And that's when he offered the Friends of CHN, where I wouldn't be ordained. I wouldn't have to give any money, but I would still be like on the end with them. And I was like, no, it's time. Just 100%. I need to be going. So,
Gotcha.
yeah.
Well, good for you. Good for you. And that's absolutely, I think that was a great decision. And as a pastor yourself, what do you want people still inside of City Harvest Network or World Harvest Church? What do you want them to understand?
First of all, if it doesn't line up with God's word, then it's not something that we should be doing. And it's not too late to leave. I don't care if you hold the highest position, if you've been there 50 years, it's not too late to leave. It's not too late to repent for things that you might have done. And that's, in that culture. But I really believe that God is calling out the false prophets. And I think he is calling out because he's, David used to always say he's raising a remnant. Well, I believe that's true, but I don't believe CHN is the remnant. I really don't. So just go, run, leave, and you will be amazed at the freedom you feel when you get out of that manipulation.
Yeah. Well, and I know you have to be out of it for a period of time before you even realize the full scope of it. I mean, I think it was about 8 months for me, and I didn't even go to church there, right? I was just working there, but it took probably about 8 months fully for me to understand and really accept what I seen, what I heard, even what sometimes the things that I was involved in because I needed to keep my job. And, I had to go back and make amends with people too.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's part of
Kim,
it.
is there anything else that you wanted to talk about that we did not talk about yet?
I don't think so. I think we've covered it all.
Wonderful. Well, I want to thank you for coming on the podcast and thank you for your courage. And I'm so excited that you are going to continue to pastor and live out God's calling on your life outside of City Harvest Network and World Harvest Church.
Oh, yeah.
And your willingness to speak honestly about your journey is going to help others and bless others who might be struggling with addiction or similar questions or the things we experience when we know, our discernment and red flags are going off, but we also we don't know, should we leave? Should we stay? I'm scared. I don't know how they're going to react.
Right.
Because experiences like yours matter and they impact people. Your voice matters. And I thank you and appreciate you for being here. And for now being able to call you you're a friend of Mega Maniacs and Robin Torgrimson, if that's
Awesome.
okay.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me. It's been nice talking to you and getting to know you better.
Well, we can continue to do that. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in tonight and liking, subscribing, and sharing. And we'll see you next week for a new episode of Mega Maniacs. Have a good night.
Bye.